The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting norml.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to think and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, tokers and tokettes, and welcome. It is Wednesday, April 27th, 2011, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us for the next 120 minutes of news, talk, interviews, information, music, comedy, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. We're back from NORML National Conference in Denver, Colorado, and also joining us here at his usual spot behind the board is Ganja John.
What's up, Russ?
Oh, me, but just barely. We got everything set up here yesterday.
I'm watching the stream right now, and it sounds like my mic's not working very well. I'm watching the stream right now. You look like you're in kind of a bunker.
Kind of a bunker? Yeah, a little bit. You may notice the change in decor behind us. As is tradition with these conventions, I forgot the banner. Yes. but I have an excuse. The excuse is when they do these things, you always have to let the hotel staff set it up because it's a union thing, right? We're not allowed to climb up and down and get that stuff. So we can't just run over and take them down. We have to wait for them. And by the time we wait for them, they don't get back to us and we forget. You know how it goes. So it will be back. We'll have the banner shipped back to us eventually from DC. Also joining us from the virtual studio in Astoria, Oregon is Cannabis Carrie.
Hello. I just wanted to correct you real quick, Russ. There really aren't unions in Colorado. That was just some crappy hotel policy.
Okay, whatever the policy. That's it. Shoot down my already lousy excuse, Carrie. Hey, and we got to give a big shout out and thanks to Cannabis Carrie. Everybody here in the cannabis community owes her a debt of gratitude for being the one who schlepped all of that gear across the Intermountain West, across Idaho and Utah and Wyoming and Oregon. Thank you so much for doing that, Carrie. We really, really appreciate it. That was so awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we even hit 3 different snowstorms on the way home. Who would have known in April?
I know. What a thing. All right. So we got more stuff to get to today. Plenty of stuff. Of course, today's Wednesday. So we meet with Dr. Mitch Earlywine to get our cannabis science questions answered. You can get into the chat or you can get on our phone line at 971-533-7111 and ask your questions live. We'll do that at half past the hour. And then at the end of the show, we've got time for a little radical ranting, although it's going to be more like radical remembrances. We're going to talk about the NORML conference and give you some behind-the-scenes stories you can't get anywhere else. Before we get to all of that, we've got the Irie Wednesday Daily Toker Tune at 20 after, and of course we begin with the hemp headlines and Cannabis Carrie. What's in the news today?
Well, there is some news we have to cover that we missed. There was a bill introduced in Pennsylvania. Also, we've got some breaking news on the Montana bill that's headed to the governor's desk this morning. And another one of those pesky letters, this time to the state of Colorado. We're going to cover all that on today's Hemp Headlines. All
right, great news coming up, and I want to remind you that we are live on the NORML Network. Follow us on Twitter at NORMLNet, and you can get all the information on the shows as they come on. Tonight we got great shows coming up from Grateful Dead's Potpourri, Green Central Station from Iowa, John Doe Radio, and the Ganja John Show tonight. Check them out later on the NORML Network.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
In today's busy world, we're inundated by advertising for all types of pharmaceuticals that come with a laundry list of potential side effects. Shouldn't you have better medical choices? Natural alternatives to pills pushed by Big Pharma? At Alternative Medical Choices, you could choose natural, safe, and effective alternative therapies that are right for your budget without nasty side effects. Cannabis, or marijuana, has been a legal medicine in the Pacific Northwest since 1998. Our doctors will help determine your qualifications for a medical marijuana recommendation in Oregon, no matter where you live. Our massage therapists will ease your aches and stress with soothing hemp seed oil or cannabis-infused massage salves. We also offer acupuncture, Reiki, and other alternative health therapies. Call Alternative Medical Choices in Portland, Oregon at 503-288-5579 or visit our website at www.altmedchoices.com. We specialize in out-of-state recommendations. That's www.altmedchoices.com or call 503-288-5579.
As High Times Senior Cultivation Editor, I'm often called into the field and asked to sample or even identify exotic strains of marijuana in their natural habitat. Now, for the first time, I've compiled more than 120 of my favorite strains into this single field guide designed to fit into your pocket as you travel the world in search of your favorite plant. From a friend's closet grow room to the wilds of Northern California, this single guide covers all of today's best-known strains, plus heirlooms and throwbacks, including High Times quality photos and information on each variety's genetic heritage and growing characteristics, plus my personal notes on aroma, flavor, and potency. So this is Danny Danko, author of the official High Times Field Guide to Marijuana Strains, wishing you good times and great ganja.
The official High Times Field Guide to Marijuana Strains is available at hightimes.com and finer bookstores.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's NORML News with Cannabis Carrie.
While we were covering the NORML conference, a bill in Pennsylvania was introduced into the Pennsylvania State Senate that would allow the use of medical marijuana in the state. Senate Bill 1003 was introduced to the Pennsylvania State Senate last week and is currently being referred to the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee. SB 1003 is a legislation bill that is closely worded to House Bill 1393, which was debated and died in 2010. In that debate, renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Cyril Wetch testified before the Health and Human Service Committee in August of 2010 saying, quote, I have personally performed 17,000 autopsies and reviewed 36,000 other postmortem protocols signed out by pathologists throughout the United States. I have never attributed one death to marijuana overdose, nor have I ever seen such a death certificate issued by any coroner or medical examiner, unquote. Dr. Harry Swidler, an emergency medicine physician, said at those hearings that, quote, marijuana is non-addicting. There is no physical dependence or physical withdrawal associated with its use. It is, from a practical standpoint, non-toxic. Marijuana is safer by some measures than any other drug. There is simply no known quality of marijuana capable of killing a person, unquote. But even that wasn't enough to convince lawmakers last time around that medical marijuana should be allowed in Pennsylvania. But this time around, Pennsylvanians for medical marijuana say that the current bill should be renamed the Governor Raymond P. Schaefer Compassionate Use Medical Marijuana Act, after the popular Republican governor Raymond Schaefer, who was the governor from 1967 to 1971. Governor Schaefer was appointed by then-President Richard Nixon as a chairman to the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse. His panel recommended that marijuana should not be placed on Schedule I of the Federal Controlled Substances Act and should be decriminalized at the federal level. President Nixon ignored the suggestions, and then the governor died back in 2006. Senator Dylan Leach introduced SB 1003 on April 25th, along with Senators Larry Farnes, James Furlow, and Wayne Fontana. The bill does include provisions for home cultivation and would make it allowable to collect sales tax on medical cannabis. Polling conducted by Franklin and Marshall in 2010 showed that 80% of residents support passing a medical marijuana law in Pennsylvania. We sure hope that lawmakers will use that statistic in their considerations.
You know, Pennsylvania has always been pretty good on trying to get these bills into the legislation. I mean, recently, since 2008, Representative Cohen's been doing a great job of this, but it never makes it much farther than getting to committee. So we hope, again, that SB 1003 will be able to make it a little farther this year. And Carrie, I was just wanting to know if you had any clarification on this bill. Does this bill allow for home cultivation? Did you mention that?
Yes, it does allow for home cultivation and also for distribution centers.
Oh, excellent. That's so much better than what we're getting out of most of the East Coast states when they're looking at medical marijuana bills. So we do hope this will go forward. Please check our NORML.org Take Action Center so you can send emails, letters, and phone calls to these Pennsylvania representatives and senators and urge them to support medical marijuana in the Keystone State.
And news about the Montana medical program broke this morning. Both the House and Senate have now passed the bill aimed at slashing the number of medical marijuana users and largely eliminating the business side of Montana's medical marijuana industry. The legislature tried to repeal Montana's medical marijuana program outright, but the Democratic governor, Brian Schweitzer, vetoed that bill a few weeks ago. Now, a largely restrictive regulation bill, 423, if signed by the governor, would completely overhaul the program with such confined regulations that if passed by the governor, it is estimated that it would severely limit the number of patients in the program, with some saying the numbers will drop from over 30,000 patients currently enrolled in the program to about 2,000 that would still qualify. The final measure of the bill cleared both chambers this morning, and like the repeal bill before it, it is headed to the governor's desk for signature. Activists are hoping that the outcome will be the same as the repeal bill, a veto by the governor. The largest blow to Montana's profitable medical marijuana industry that has sprung up around their medical marijuana program would be limited to a not-for-profit system with language that would make it difficult for anyone to profit by selling medical marijuana. Montana citizens would need to provide more proof than in the past to qualify for the program. Providers would not be able to accept money for marijuana, and any providers of medical marijuana would be open to monitoring and inspection of growing facilities by authorities. The measure that was negotiated by a conference committee passed in the Senate by 34-16 and 72-28 in the House. Governor Schweitzer hasn't indicated whether he would sign or veto the measure, but he has suggested that something could be done to control the medical marijuana industry in Montana. Activists are hoping this isn't what he had in mind, but are very nervous in light of the Friday budget deal that was passed. In that budget deal with Republican leaders, Governor Schweitzer added funds to the state budget for medical marijuana contingent on the passage of the overhaul bill. Under the bill, marijuana would be given to patients free of charge by a caregiver, or they can still grow their own. A provider of medical marijuana would be limited to 3 patients. Currently, there are no limits, which has given rise to some growers operating large operations. Several medical marijuana businesses in the state were raided last month, and just last week, the U.S. Attorney for Montana, Michael Cotter, issued a letter that said the prosecution of businesses that sell marijuana is a core priority for the Department of Justice. If the law is signed, Bill 423 would force many patients and providers to just retreat to the black market. Republican Senator John Brended said that after the passage, that if they had let the program go on any longer without restrictions, that Montana would have 50, 60, or even 70,000 people in the program. Republican Senator Jim Shockley said that the bill was necessary, adding, quote, "Are people not going to get treatment that need it? Yes. But on the other hand, people who shouldn't be using it aren't going to get it." We will let you know if Governor Schweitzer moves on this bill with either a signature or a veto, but please contact him now and tell him to veto Bill 423 and leave Montana's medical marijuana patients safe.
I can't believe that last quote, Carrie, because that's something I've always said kind of tongue in cheek, like, by God, let's make sure someone in pain doesn't get weed if that's what it takes to keep a teenager from smoking pot. Right? I've always kind of said that as a joke. This guy's coming right out and saying it. Yep, sure. Yep. Some people that could benefit from cannabis, who could ease their pain or their spasticity or their nausea. Yep, some of them are going to be let out, but at least stoners won't be smoking pot. Really. That's as far as you want to go with this. It's amazing to me, too, when you think about in Montana and just about every other state in the United States, prescription drug abuse is a much more severe problem right now than any sort of concerns about the abuse, the so-called abuse, of medical marijuana. And yet nobody ever talks about there being too many OxyContin patients. Nobody ever talks about, gee, what are we going to do to cut back on Merck and Pfizer and all these businesses that are making a killing, jacking up the price of these pills with a 10,000% to 250,000% markup. That's not a typo, folks. 10,000 to 250,000% 50,000% markup on most of the pills that are prescribed by Big Pharma out there. And they want to complain about abuse of medical marijuana. Only in medical marijuana would it be considered abuse when more and more people are successfully treating their illnesses and symptoms. Only with medical marijuana would we consider that abuse. If Merck came out with some sort of pill that was freeing 30,000 Montanans from spasticity and seizures and the problems of glaucoma and the chronic pain that they're dealing with, if there were some pill manufactured by Big Pharma, this would be frontline headline stories about what a wonder drug we have found. But because it's medical marijuana, because it was in a Cheech and Chong movie, somehow we've got to treat anybody that wants to use it as a criminal first until they prove they're a patient. Let's erase these stupid distinctions and just get to legalizing cannabis for everyone. If you want to use it because it's a medical benefit to you, fine. If it's a religious sacrament to you, fine. Or you just got some time to kill on a Friday night, fine. Legalize it all, and then we don't have to worry about protecting patients anymore.
And on Tuesday, the U.S. Attorney for Colorado, John Walsh, sent a letter from the United States Department of Justice. Up until recently, most states with medical marijuana laws have been operating under the Ogden Memo from the Department of Justice that advised that they had the right to prosecute anyone involved in the marijuana trade, whether medical or not, but they would not do that as long as individuals were obviously operating in compliance with relevant state laws. But in the first few months of 2011, U.S. attorneys have issued a different type of letter in California, Washington, Montana, Hawaii, and now in Colorado, a state that has a vigorous medical marijuana program supported by a multi-million-dollar industry. The letters advise that if the feds view the state laws as being contrary to federal laws, which all of them are, since marijuana is still considered a Schedule I substance, that they may choose to prosecute medical marijuana sellers and even state employees that are involved in the regulation of medical marijuana. In the letter addressed to Colorado's Governor Hickenlooper, it said, quote, while the Department of Justice will not focus its limited resources on seriously ill individuals who use marijuana as part of the medically recommended treatment regime in compliance with state law, it does maintain its full authority to vigorously enforce federal laws against individuals and organizations that participate in unlawful manufacturing and distribution activity involving marijuana, even if such activities are permitted under state law, unquote. Also, the letter pointed out that it is illegal for anyone to rent space to someone who will use that space to manufacture or distribute marijuana. The letter that also went to Colorado Attorney General John Suthers, who has expressed his concern with the number of people currently licensed to use medical marijuana, it's around 123,000 currently, and the demographic of many of the medical marijuana patients, a trend that he says is young and male. He reiterated that the feds will probably not prosecute seriously ill people for using marijuana under state law, a reference that lawmakers think that not everyone using medical marijuana is doing so because they are seriously ill. When giving the numbers of patients enrolled in the state's program, he used the term claiming to be using marijuana for medical purposes. It is not clear how this new effort will affect some pending legislation requiring investing in medical marijuana businesses that was killed in the House, but now may be back in the Senate. Attorney Wall said that the legislation allowing people to invest in medical marijuana businesses would not be legal and that anyone involved in such funds would be subject to prosecution. He also made it clear that the Department of Justice will consider prosecution of businesses involved in large-scale production and sale of any medical marijuana-infused products, leading to many this morning wondering if Colorado is in danger of a federal crackdown. Laura Creo, a spokesman for the Cannabis Therapy Institute, a Colorado group that trains cannabis workers and educates activists, said that the irony was not lost on Coloradans that Attorney General John Suthers has participated in a lawsuit to exempt Colorado from federal healthcare legislation, but seems perfectly fine with the federal involvement in Colorado's medical marijuana laws. With the feds seemingly willing to target property owners and even state employees, it doesn't look like they will get much help from the person in the state that has been sworn to protect and defend them, the Attorney General of Colorado, John Suthers. We will be bringing you future reports of the reactions to this latest threat to the states by the federal government.
Well, this just in, marijuana is still illegal. Well, who knew? Wow, yes, of course it's federally legal. And every now and then they come out with some sort of letter saying, we don't want to bust any real patients, but we're going to bust everyone else, by God. We've heard this from the federal government time and time again. And until we just get over this whole idea that we can separate patients from criminals, because it's impossible. It's never going to happen. These people that say, oh, well, they're claiming to use marijuana medically. No, their doctor is claiming they're using marijuana medically. This got approved by a doctor. This is not just some guy walking around saying he got a backache. A doctor confirmed this. A doctor confirmed medical records that show this. And that medical marijuana patients are overwhelmingly male and young, at least according to the Colorado Registry, isn't a surprise either. Who are the people in this country who work the hardest, who have the kind of construction jobs, the kind of hard work field jobs, the kind of hard work back-breaking labor jobs out there that might give you a little chronic pain and require a little bit of medical marijuana for treatment? And how many of those people in those jobs have access to good quality health insurance? Not a whole bunch of them. It's no surprise young people are using cannabis medically because they know it's non-toxic, they know it's effective, and they know it works.
What do you think about a break, Russ?
I think it's time for a break and investigating our own medical properties here. Love the purple coat, by the way.
Thank you.
We'll be back right after this.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
USVI normal go broke down barrier. Herb is medicine to broke down barrier. Boost the economy and broke down barrier. It's helping other states broke down barrier. Cannabis for legalized to broke down barrier. Join and speak your voice broke down barrier. We gonna change the law broke down barrier. We got to educate broke down barrier. Yeah, this is Nayora, bigging up USVI normal. Working to legalize cannabis, for the whole of the Virgin Islands.
USVI NORML is a non-profit organization working to legalize cannabis for the use by the industries and responsible adults. Do your part. Join USVI NORML. Register to vote. Pass the word. Voice your opinion. You can change the law. Contact us for more information at 340-244-9179. You can also visit our website at www.usvinorml.org.
It's time for your Daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420-friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Our PodSafe music is donated by freedom-loving musicians who support our goal of ending adult marijuana prohibition. Today we get tunes for Irie Wednesday, our celebration of that mellow vibe we find in the best of reggae, ska, calypso, and Latin music. Brought to you by Grateful Dread Public Radio, Summit, New Jersey's progressive peace station at gdreadradio.net. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@norml.org. Now, here's some great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes.
Hey now, friends. Grateful Dread here in the studios of Grateful Dread Public Radio, the grassroots voice of Summit, New Jersey. We're working hard, awaiting the spring, and wishing you a most Irie Wednesday. Our musical gift for you today is a rousing bit of Cali ska. Lumination is an unsigned dub rock quintet based in San Rafael, California. The band is a popular regional touring outfit that makes friends wherever it goes. So far, Lumination has opened for headlining performers in more than 1,000 theaters. The members have really earned their growing success. You can expect a full-length album from them really soon. In the meantime, one of their songs won a spot on Quick Star Productions' Ska for Life compilation series. You can find it on iTunes. This particular song is on Volume 5. Here's a taste of modern ska from Lumination. Big ol' spliff.
Let go!
Summertime is the time to unwind. Summertime's here and it's time to unwind. Summertime is the time to unwind. Summertime's here and it's time to unwind. We get a while to make you smile. We get a while to bed for a while. We get a while. Diva King. She really, really loves me. She wants to be my wife, maybe the husband. Next thing we know, her blouse come undone. Kissed up on the chin, she asked the red-eye man. Kissed her again, she tells me well done. He kissed her again, she said, Bobby G, stop wasting time, take off the panties. Summertime is the time to unwind. Summertime's here and it's time to unwind. Summertime is the time to unwind. Summertime's here and it's time to unwind. We get a while to make you smile. We get a while to bed for a while. We get a while. All right, Moby, come on.
Check out the Daily Toker Tunes at the Stash blog by surfing to stash.normal.org and choosing Media, and then Toker Tunes from the main menu.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
Yo, what's good? This is Be Real of Cypress Hill chilling on Normal Show Live. Legalize it.
This is Normal Show Live.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years. They've got mandatory sentences, and these judges just say, they throw up their hands and say, there's nothing we can do with mandatory sentences. We've got to take a look at what we're considering crimes.
When the Reverend Pat Robertson from television's The 700 Club
criminalizing marijuana, criminalizing the possession of a few ounces of pot and that kind of thing, I mean, it's just...
makes more sense on the marijuana issue than the President, the Congress, and the Supreme Court.
It's costing us a fortune, and it's ruining young people. The young people go into prisons, they come out, they go in as youths, and they come out as hardened criminals, and that's not a good thing.
You know we're winning.
It's time for Normal Show Live's Cannabis Science with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York in Albany and the author of Understanding Marijuana. Now here's your dose of cannabis science.
All right, we are back on a Wednesday here with Dr. Mitch Earlywine, who's had a week off while we were traveling to NORML Conference. I hope you had a good 420, Dr. Mitch.
Well, let's just say it's good to be back on the show.
Oh, so glad to have you here. You know, I've got a couple of stories I want to get to, but before we do all of that, we always give you the first word here on any new studies or information about cannabis science or history or culture that we should know about.
Some intriguing new data out of Vanderbilt suggests that cannabis-dependent folks can decrease craving and use by aerobic exercise. Just wanted to let anybody know if they feel like they're craving a little more than they ought to, a little jaunt around the block or a stint on the exercise bike may be just as appropriate and helpful as actually hitting the vaporizer.
How would a person know, you know, if they're a daily cannabis consumer, whether or not their use is getting into that dependence territory where they're feeling these kind of, I mean, how do you tell that the craving is just not you liking to smoke pot?
I think the clincher here is, do you feel like it's something that's interfering with your daily functioning? So do you find that you have to get high earlier and earlier in the day? Do you feel like you need to use larger quantities all the time? And those sorts of indicators are usually good. If your spouse or partner or friends are concerned that you're not necessarily as attentive or as open as you usually are, I think that's worth entertaining as well. It's really partly a product of your own subjective state, but if you think you're spending more time high than straight and a sense aren't as productive as you'd like to be, that might be another way to say, hey, maybe it's time for me to at least start later in the day or take more days off and see how I feel about that.
What are some of those symptoms going to be if they're feeling a withdrawal from cannabis?
It's funny because I don't think of it as withdrawal in the same way you think of, say, heroin withdrawal or something like that, but there's usually some mild irritability, low tolerance for frustration, and often a lot of craving for cannabis, even on days of the week that you wouldn't normally use. That would be a big indicator. And if you often catch yourself just being really short with people and not as essentially engaged with some of your tasks without the plant, that may be a nice hint to say, I need to take some time off. And then also, if you find the intoxication experience isn't as fun as it used to be, it's just sort of this everyday ho-hum thing like, oh yeah, I'm high again, that's sort of a shame because this is a plant that was, really something we could all enjoy and take a lot of delight in. And if it's no longer providing that kind of experience, then maybe it's time to take some time away.
Yeah, I kind of think of it like German chocolate cake. I love German chocolate cake, but if I had it every day, I might not like it as much as when I get it, once a week or whatever. So, yeah, there's something to that, folks. You don't have to smoke every day. Take some time off, and you'll be surprised when you come back to it how much more enjoyable it can be.
I'm looking forward to a strain called German chocolate cake.
I'm sure somebody's working on it right now. Another question I had, and we're going to be taking questions from our chat room here in just a moment, so get them in, and if you put the word question in front of it, it helps Carrie find it out for us. You can also call us live at 971-533-7111. But I've got a story I'm doing here right after our segment with you, Dr. Mitch, and it concerns hash. And I was wondering if you could tell folks scientifically the difference, if any, between raw cannabis and hash.
It's odd because the range of potency is the biggest issue, and hash is, always supposed to be legendary in the extreme potency it can be. But basically, people take the trichomes, shake them off the plants, so now there isn't really any leaf. It's just these glands, and then they're pressed together in various ways in order to form a more compact package. And in fact, when we see evidence from hash literally millennia ago, it was really about storage and transportation as much as it was about increasing potency. What's odd is samples of hash have ranged from literally 0% THC up to 30% THC. So obviously the propensity for a much stronger experience is certainly there. So watching dosage is really important. And with oral administration, I have to really recommend extreme caution because of the variation in potency. This is not like eating your standard brownie and could be markedly more of an experience than folks might have signed up for.
We talk about that crack and powder disparity with cocaine, and one of our rejoinders is, it's the same drug. Crack and cocaine are the same thing chemically. Can we say that truthfully about hash, that chemically it's the same as pot?
In fact, both the THC and the other cannabinoids seem to be present in samples of hash and in samples of cannabis, but it's a little bit like that whiskey-beer comparison where the potential, at least, is for it to be at least twice as strong, if not more so, than your average cannabis, and so something for folks to keep in mind if they want to be hash consumers.
Okay, let's start up with the questions from our chat room. Our first one comes from Ganja Truth, and it seems like a rhetorical question, but I think maybe this could lead you into some discussion about the substance. He asks, Marinol is expensive, isn't it?
Alas, Marinol is dreadfully expensive, and it is only synthetic THC. It does not have the other cannabinoids. Essentially, without any, government support, I'm not sure if Marinol would have ever really been developed, and the pills are now available in at least 3 different sizes, but at one time were only available in 2, basically not enough, and oh my God, I'm totally baked. So the fact that it's harder to control dosage with oral administration of basically a pill that you can't even break in half because it's basically a synthetic oil type capsule is really cumbersome for folks who are looking for medicinal effects. And depending on who you ask, the $8 to $10 a pill range is not out of the ordinary. And if you need 3 of those a day, you can see how that would add up mighty fast for what would probably work with, say, $3 worth of cannabis. So our HMOs, I think, would appreciate a legal source of THC that's markedly cheaper.
Yeah, and it goes to, discussing the drug czar and all these opponents that come back. Every time we talk about medical marijuana, they say, well, there's dronabinol, there's Marinol. And to go back to our German chocolate cake analogy, comparing marijuana to Marinol is like comparing a German chocolate cake to egg whites. Yeah, egg whites are in a cake, but it's not the whole cake. And while there is THC in Marinol, it ain't the whole plant. And, that's maybe a way we can get that across to some people.
Well, and in fact, because there is an absence of, in particular, cannabidiol, the chance for more aversive reactions is actually higher because THC tends to produce on its own some of the more disturbing sort of magical ideation and odd symptoms that people don't particularly find attractive. And it also seems to be the one that creates some of the anxiety and panic that some users experience. Without that cannabidiol to take the edge off, this could really be a frightening drug.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to a question here from from Rational Voice, who is asking, are heavy metals of concern to those who vaporize? Are heavy metals of concern to hydroponics growers? And I suppose they're talking about lead and other types of metals that could possibly get into the groundwater table or the soil. Any concerns there?
The clincher here is any plant tends to concentrate minerals in the soil more than they are present in the soil itself. So that's definitely something to have in mind. However, unless you're, fertilizing with lead or something, this shouldn't be a big issue as far as the cannabis plant is concerned. If you're apprehensive about your city water source or something like that, running it through a filter would certainly be an advisable thing. I think some folks have been wound up about metals found in a sample of cannabis in Germany last year around this time, but that looked like it was actually a contamination issue where someone was trying to increase the weight of their cannabis for sale. That was not something that was a product of the growing itself.
Okay. Mississippi Hippie's got a good question here. Have there been any studies on the use of cannabis for the treatment of interstitial cystitis, and what were the results of the study?
As it turns out, cystitis seems like it should be promising as far as how cannabis might have some impact, but there's no randomized clinical trial and no journal-published case studies yet. There's a little bit of lore. I've had at least one email about it, and we'll have to see if someone can document a case and get it published, I'd certainly be eager to find out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another question coming in here, and this is an interesting one about the different types of pain. This person asks, I find marijuana helps some kinds of pain, like the pain from my edema, but other kinds, like the pain from a headache or a sprain, it doesn't help at all. Why is this?
It's intriguing because there are actually at least two sources of pain in as far as our receptors are concerned. So if you think about dull aches, the pain you get from, say, having your hand around something cold too long, that's sort of one set. And then the sharp pain of, say, having a needle go into your finger is a different set. And so it looks like cannabis may be better for these dull ache type than for the sharp ones, at least at certain doses. And that adds a wrinkle that makes things kind of complicated, is that a medium dose seems to be ideal for pain. Too much actually makes pain worse. Too little actually doesn't do the trick. So it's one of those baby bear situations like with the three bears.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I want to remind folks, if you don't get your question asked on today's show, you can join us again on next Wednesday's show, or you can send an email directly to Dr. Mitch by emailing 420research@gmail.com. That's 420research@gmail.com. Randy 1971 has the question, who wants to know, is there any medication that you would say do not use with cannabis? What is it and why?
I would say Viagra is definitely not a good idea because cannabis essentially inhibits the enzyme that breaks Viagra down. I'm not a big fan of Viagra anyway, and in truth, I think the tacit assumption that you need a hard penis to have fun in bed is something we all need to question. And then any of the stimulants are often troublesome because cannabis tends to increase heart rate, and so do the stimulants, so I would really not recommend mixing those either.
Okay. Let's see here. And Ganja Truth got another question in here. He says it's not for him because he doesn't believe this at all, but he hears a lot of people talking about heavy use of marijuana causing schizophrenia.
It's just not, the data just really aren't that compelling. There's one study that suggests a subset of folks with a particular genetic propensity, if they used marijuana heavy before age 15, they were more likely to become psychotic. Then another study came out that essentially couldn't replicate that first one, but found some other genetic risk where it did seem to turn out. There have been arguments that maybe heavy cannabis use would make you have your psychotic break earlier, but that's also failing to replicate. I'm also really concerned that a lot of this is a spurious relationship to amphetamine and cocaine and crack cocaine, the stimulant drugs that tend to work in the dopaminergic system where schizophrenia is much more involved, and that people are willing to say they smoke pot, but often unwilling to fess up to having smoked crack, for example, and that pot is essentially being blamed for the effect of these hard drugs.
Mm-hmm. And, with such a long history of usage of cannabis in America and all over the world for that matter, wouldn't something like this have spiked the levels of schizophrenia or psychosis, say around 1979 when we had, 60% of high school seniors admitting to having tried marijuana, the American peak of use?
So both across time and across different countries that have very disparate uses of cannabis, the rate of schizophrenia is almost identical, just a little under 1%. So I really feel like at the epidemiological, full country level at least, the data aren't supporting this. If, something were going on in some subset of schizophrenia for just a subset of people, yeah, there would perhaps be a way to hide that because over the years we've gotten better with prenatal care that often contributes to the stressors that induce schizophrenia. But if that's the case, this must be the smallest effect in the world, or we would have seen it by now.
Yeah, okay. Time for a couple more questions here. RU user wants to know, does the absence of cannabinoids, or marijuana use for that matter, cause dementia or any other diseases?
It turns out that rats that are bred or basically scientifically modified so that they don't have cannabinoid receptors like NORML are depressive, hostile, angry, completely unhigh rats, if you will. And the cannabinoid system is very complicated and involved in how we essentially take care of the oxidation that's left over from our digestion and the way our cells reproduce and stuff like that. So it would be a real drag to not have cannabinoids, and could essentially lead to perhaps premature aging and certainly a lot of irritability and hostility.
Every time I think about this subject, about the endocannabinoid system and whether or not there might be a cannabinoid deficiency, I can see the future when there's a political correctness about it and people are saying, hey, I'm not an asshole. I'm just cannabinoid deficient. So,
Well, at least we know what the treatment should be.
At least we know what they need to do. That's right. All right. One last question here from Slimy, who wants to know, what do you have to say about the explosion of JWH chemicals, synthetic cannabinoids and things like spice?
I'm really apprehensive about these. We don't have any data long-term or even short-term in humans suggesting any safety. And if it weren't for prohibition, we probably wouldn't even have these being consumed by humans. This was something developed in a really important special lab to study the cannabinoid system in rodents. This is not something that anybody ever thought would become a recreational drug, and I think prohibition has essentially led the capitalist system through the evolution that it normally takes to find the way to get product to people in the way that they want. And it's just really, really spooky to me. I'm sorry to see that this has happened. I would much rather have a tax and regulated market in cannabis.
Yeah, just like most people wouldn't have drank bathtub distilled gin out from the woods before Prohibition, most people wouldn't be using synthetic cannabinoids if they get their hand on the real thing.
You got it.
Well, Dr. Mitch Earlywine joins us every Wednesday here for our Cannabis Science segment, taking questions on science, history, and culture of marijuana. And again, Dr. Mitch, thank you for such a great service.
Always a pleasure. Bye now.
All right, we're right back with the Radical Rant, and stay tuned. It's Normal Show Live.
Especially if you might be a parent who dabbled a time or two in your youth. So to help you out, get your copy of Dr. Mitch Earlywine's latest book, A Parent's Guide to Marijuana. Dr. Earlywine is an associate professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and an expert on the studies concerning marijuana, its effect on health and society, and the methodology behind the statistics. He is a frequent guest here on our daily audio stash. Dr. Earlywine lays it all out without the propaganda and scare tactics that parents know won't work with teenagers. He presents a rational understanding of cannabis, what it is and what it isn't, and why kids shouldn't be using marijuana. You can order today through Amazon.com or check our links at our blog, stash.normal.org.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Mr. President.
I said, hey, do you have a joint, kids? Sure would be a lot cooler if you did. Lie, don't hide it. Lie, don't hide it. Oh, lie, don't hide it. Lie, don't hide it. Just lie, don't hide it. Fire up right now.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, folks. Been a while since we've had a good rant to go off on, and while I was gone to the NORML National Conference, a story came across the AP Newswires that is certainly rant-worthy. This is out of Oklahoma City. I picked this up from Tulsa World, which says, converting marijuana to hashish could land Oklahomans a life prison sentence under a bill approved in the Oklahoma sentence. A life prison sentence. Oh my God, that's terrible. So it goes on to say, the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs spokesman Mark Woodward said the goal of the bill is to send a message that illegal drugs won't be tolerated in Oklahoma. Conviction of a first offense of cooking hashish. Cooking hashish, John. They're cooking it now.
They're cooking it like meth?
Like meth. They're the hash cooks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not an extraction. It's cooking. Yeah. The conviction of a first offense of cooking hashish would result in a prison sentence from 2 years to life in prison. Sentences would be doubled under a second offense, so you'd get double life, I guess.
That's after you're dead, they keep you for another 70 years.
That's right. They just keep your corpse in the cell. And those convicted would not be eligible for a suspended sentence or probation.
Wow.
You're going in for life permanently, no arguments, no nothing, right? For cooking hash. Now, this bill was promoted by the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. These are the same people a couple of years ago. I wrote up a blog post on their marijuana fact sheet that they made. Their marijuana fact sheet claimed that pot today is 30 times stronger than the 1% Woodstock weed they used to smoke back in the 60s, you know, back before they were able to test the potency of marijuana. They also claimed that it damages brain cells and reproductive organs. Right. So these are the same people who brought you that fact sheet now want to throw the hash cooks, the hash cooks in prison for life. Now, whenever I get these things, you know, first of all, it's just ridiculous that you'd want to punish hashish much more than raw cannabis. Because like we just talked about with Dr. Mitch, they're the same thing. Right? Hash is cannabis. Hash is just the cannabinoids and flavonoids and terpenes extracted into a more condensed product. So it's more potent, certainly, but it's no different than cannabis. So to have a different sentence for it seems a little bit ridiculous as well. And even if that is their excuse, right, that hash is so much more potent, so we need to punish it more, I wonder how they're going to feel when they learn that Schedule 3 dronabinol, you know, those Marinol pills, are more potent than hash. Oh, no, that's right. Because they're Schedule 3, they're legal. You can have those, right? But, you know, whenever I get a story like this, one of the things I like to do is to look at our criminal justice system and try to equate the sentences here. You know, a life sentence for making hashish. What does that equate to in the Oklahoma system of justice? And so I decided this time I'd take a look at rape. Let's just see if making hash is as bad as rape in the state of Oklahoma. So I found a story. This was up by the Slane and Phillips law firm, their defense law firm here. And this was just from a case that was decided in February of 2011. An Oklahoma City man who pleaded guilty to 5 charges of first-degree rape in Oklahoma County District Court last October was sentenced late last week. This was February. John Earl Stepney Jr., age 33, was given a life sentence without parole for each of the 5 rapes of which he was convicted. Oklahoma County District Judge Kenneth Watson sentenced Stepney to life in prison without parole for each of the following rape incidents. He raped a woman who was asleep in her apartment in November of 2008. In December 7th of 2008, he raped a woman. He attacked her as she was walking home from work. December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, he raped a woman who was attacked and kidnapped as she was shopping at the mall. On January 5th, he raped a woman who was doing laundry at her apartment complex. And on January 7th, he raped a woman who was vacuuming her car at a car wash. So in all of these cases, a violent, out of nowhere, total surprise, attack from a stranger type of rape going on here. And the guy was also accused of forcing 2 of the women to withdraw cash from their bank accounts at ATMs and was using a BB gun that looked like a handgun to threaten and coerce his victims. So 5 women attacked out of nowhere, raped by a stranger. 2 of them are robbed, fearing for their lives with what they believe to be a handgun that could shoot and kill them at any moment. That'll get you life in prison. Or if you make hash. If you rape a woman with a gun to her head and force her to withdraw from the ATM, that's worth life in prison. Or if you make hash. If you make hash, we might have to put you in prison as well.
Making hash in Oklahoma supports the terrorists.
I guess it does. So that's the one case I came up with, right? And here's a guy, 5 rapes, right, before they got him. Because maybe they were too busy taking down medical marijuana patients or something. I don't know. But that was one case I found. Now, here's one I found from 2009, far more disturbing. From USA Today out of Alester, Oklahoma, this is from 2009, 2 state lawmakers are questioning a plea agreement that will allow a man to serve only 1 year in jail on a conviction for raping a 4-year-old girl. 19 of the 20 years of a sentence against 64-year-old David Harold Earls were suspended as part of a plea agreement reached with Pittsburgh County prosecutors. So the sentence was 20 years in prison for the rapist of the 4-year-old. But 19 of them, he gets to stay out on the streets on probation. Now, he pleaded no contest, which is not the same as pleading guilty. Pleading guilty says, yes, I did it. Pleading no contest says, well, I'm not going to say I did it, but you got a pretty strong case, so I'm not going to fight it, right? So it's not an admission of guilt. It's an admission of, I can't prove I'm innocent. All right, let's call it that. So Earls pleaded no contest on May 13th to first-degree rape and forcible sodomy. He has spent nearly 9 months in jail already and is scheduled to be released September 24th. So that meant he was already in jail for 9 months, awaiting the trial, and so he gets credit for time served. So actually, after he's sentenced, he's only in jail for 3 months. Before he gets out, and then spends the rest of the 19 years of his sentence on probation. Now, he would serve the remaining 19 years of his sentence under supervised release, right? Supervised release. He has a probation officer, right? And would have to register as a sex offender. Now, another news story on this from news9.com interviewed this guy's daughter, right? This rapist's daughter. The daughter of a convicted rapist speaks out, saying he deserves more than 1 year behind bars. She says her father deserves a life sentence. David Earl's rape conviction made national headlines this month after a Pittsburgh County judge sentenced him to only 1 year in prison. Quote, my father is a monster and he needs to stay in prison, end quote, said Denise Earls. Denise Earls says when she was young, her father raped her. She hoped he was finally going to get the punishment he deserved. Quote, well, I was completely outraged because it brought back all the memories that I went through as a child, and just to know that he only got a year when I have a life sentence to deal with this, end quote, said Denise Earls. So, this is Oklahoma justice for you, folks. Now, to give you the full story, in the case with this 4-year-old, and she was 5 by the time it went to trial, the prosecutors found that she wasn't a good witness. Like, a lot of 5-year-olds aren't good witnesses in court. They, easily cry, get very emotional, can't, focus, It's very hard to bring a case like this. And so the prosecutors argued, that this plea bargain was as good as it was going to get, or else the guy was going to be able to walk because they didn't have, the evidence they needed to get the conviction. I think that's a bunch of horse shit, but whatever. That's their excuse. But any sort of system that allows this man who sexually assaulted and sodomized a 4-year-old child, that allows him not just the 1 year, even if he'd gotten the full 20 years and had to spend all 20 years behind bars, he'd still be doing less time than the guy cooking hash or cooking hash. See, they even got me, John. The guy making hash, the guy extracting hash. Our priorities are so far out of whack in this war on drugs that these lawmakers proposing a life sentence for hash can't even see that they're essentially saying that hash making is as bad as rape, that hash making is as bad as treason, that hash making is as bad as capital murder, that hash making is as bad as desertion and mutiny in the military, and we all know it is not. I'll even give benefit of the doubt to people out there who really do believe marijuana is a terrible, dangerous, deadly drug. Even if you really believe that, even if you really believe all the reefer madness and that people like me who smoke pot every day ought to be locked up, there is no way you can believe that manufacture of hash is as bad as murder. That manufacture of hash is as bad as rape and sodomy. There's just no way that you can be a functional human being with any sense of conscience, any sense of justice in your mind to be able to accept this. And it's just amazing to me too, what do you do about this? Maybe somebody can plant some hash on this David Earls so he actually ends up doing some of his time, right? Just unbelievable to me. And again, hash and pot are the same thing, okay? Let me give you a basic difference, folks, between hash and pot, right? Let's say this is pot. Pot goes like this. Whoa, I'm high. Here's how hash goes. Whoa, I'm high. That's it. That's the big difference, folks. The pot takes you, 10, 20 puffs to get there. The hash takes you 1 or 2 dabs. But either way, you're getting the same high. You're getting the same marijuana. You're getting the same effect, the same experience. The only difference is concentration. Marijuana is to hash as oranges are to orange juice concentrate. Making it a little frozen orange juice concentrate does not change the way the orange juice tastes, people. It does not change the vitamin C content. It does not make it any more or less good for you. And the same goes for hashish. And when you're a medical patient, a lot of these medical patients require the concentration of this hashish.
This is NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
For Cannabis Carrie and Ganja John, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us here for show number 701. We're back in just a few minutes with Toker Talk Radio. Stick around. For those of you listening on the podcast, take care of each other, Tokers.